Hello. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's been such an incredible pleasure to work with Tasveer in putting this festival together. And I'm really, really honored to be here with Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy, who is one of the most prolific and, I think, a very courageous documentary filmmaker working today. Sharmeen, you made your first film in 2003. And tell me what drew you to filmmaking, documentary filmmaking?
I call myself the accidental filmmaker because I studied economics and political science like a good Pakistani girl. And I became a filmmaker because I wanted to get into something visual. I was a journalist at the age of 14, so I've been creating trouble from a very young age. And I have always been interested in stories about communities and about people that are marginalized on the fringes of society, about issues that make people deeply uncomfortable and get people upset and angry. Sometimes at me, because I'm the messenger bringing forward the story, and sometimes at the issue itself. And I became a filmmaker simply because I wanted to move from print into something visual. And one day, online, I put down visual journalism, and the word documentary popped up, and that's when I decided at the age of 20 that I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. So everything I've learned has been on the field, and I have now, I think my last film, my newest film, which is out on October 2nd, is my 23rd film that I've made over a span of 16 years. And so I didn't win an Academy Award on my first day of filmmaking, won it after probably 12 years of making films. But each one of my films, if you look at my body of work, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or Iraq or East Timor or Pakistan or South Africa, the theme that runs through all my work is children, refugees, women, minorities. And I hope that when I look back at my body of work, 20, 25 years from now, I hope that my films have made some sort of change in the communities that I have made films about and have impacted legislation and the way people think about an issue, which to me is far more important now than it's ever been.
So you certainly have had an amazing journey. When you look back to when you first started making documentaries in Pakistan, and Pakistan doesn't really have a tradition of documentary filmmaking. So from that time to today, are the challenges still the same, or what has changed?
I think, I don't know how many people here have ever seen my first few films, but my first film was about 7 Afghan refugee children on the streets of Pakistan, and it came out in 2003. And my last film that I made in Pakistan is about to also come out. It's called Freedom Fighters. It's about 3 women who fight for freedom for other women in the country, from the north to the south. And it basically shows how women use the fact that they've been oppressed and turn that into something powerful in freeing other women who have been oppressed. So in the 20s, when I used to make my films, I was driven by anger, and it was always about the issue. It was always about pushing against the system. Now I think what's changed in myself is that I make films about issues, but I want people to see those issues through the eyes of people who are fighting and championing those issues. And so a lot of my recent work has been about champions. So you might find somebody that was a child bride, but now she is running in all-women, community center. She's fighting for other women's rights. And so through her eyes, you see the issue of child marriage, but you also see how a woman has overcome that. So I see a change in the way I address the issues as well. I see the way that I want to work now with the government. I want to work with the system to bring about change, because I know that Change only comes when a lot of people put an effort together. And so I think I've moved from being an angry young woman to being somebody who has realized that the maximum impact can happen when I use my craft and I bring it forward to the government and engage with them.
So your subjects are, as you said, they're generally difficult subjects that not many other people are talking about, and they're important issues that need to be talked about. And you essentially, take the issue and put a giant spotlight on it and make us face it, and then ask, what are we going to do about it? And in doing so, you've taken a lot of harsh criticism. How do you keep going, and what motivates you?
I know I'm having a massive impact on the discourse, and I'm pushing the envelope when I wake up in the morning and see a group of people railing against me, because I know that I have done something right to make them angry. And so that's what keeps me going, to be honest. So when people ask me, what about the criticism? What about the people who criticize the work that you do? And to me, the criticism is not so much, I feel, about the work as it is about feeling deeply uncomfortable about the issues that I'm bringing to the forefront. Because you cannot say that a father killing his daughter is right. You cannot say that it is right for a woman who's been raped not to get justice. Or you cannot say that it's right for a victim of child abuse not to get justice. Because there can be nobody who doesn't think that. But I think the most important thing out of all of this is, what is the film achieving? If the film is achieving a certain kind of discourse, if everybody on nightly news is talking about the issue, if the Prime Minister is making a move, if stall legislation is passed, then the film is having an impact. Then I need to think about the people whose lives are going to be impacted versus all those people who feel that somehow it's bringing a bad name to them. Because for me, I could have been Sabah. It's a luck of the draw that I'm not Sabah. Any one of us could have been Sabah. Should we not then champion Sabah so that there are no more Sabahs in our part of the world? So it's very, very important for a minute to get down from our high horses and to think about what and who we would be if the luck of the draw hadn't worked for us. And that's what keeps me going. I know I push away all those voices because I'm concentrating on voices like Sabah and amplifying those.
The film we saw tonight, A Girl in the River, very powerful film about a very strong young woman. How did you find that story, and how did you learn about her, and was it difficult to convince her to make the film?
I've been wanting to make a film about honor killings for a very long time, but I wanted to make a film with a survivor, and it's very hard to find survivors. So one morning I woke up and I was reading the newspaper, and there were 3 lines in it that a girl had been shot and thrown in a river and had miraculously survived in what appeared to be an attempted honor killing. And I remember waking up in the morning and calling my team and saying, we need to find the hospital that this young woman has landed up in. And we managed to find the hospital that day. We called the hospital. The head of the hospital, which was a government hospital, was run by this man who had 3 daughters. And when he heard that we wanted to make a film, he was like, come today, I will give you access. Her story needs to be told. I have daughters of my own, and I would never want this to happen. And so here in the middle of a small town, we had found a champion for women. And so we arrived over there. And my first impression of Sabah was that I'm not sure if I'm directing Sabah or she's directing me, because when we arrived over there in this hospital room, she was ready to tell her story. She was so ready to tell her story. She was saying, okay, you have to interview my mother-in-law, you have to interview my sister-in-law, you have to do this, you have to do that. And she was always in control. She had this inner strength. Let me tell you, for all those who haven't been to Pakistan, Pakistani women are something to be reckoned with. They don't back down. If you look at I always say Pakistan's greatest champions are its women. They climb mountains, they win Nobel Peace Prizes, they rock home some Oscars. They are really a force to be reckoned with. And Sabah, here is an illiterate woman in a small town. She has the courage to tell her story. She has the courage to fight. She has the courage to stand up. And because of her courage, because of the fact that she was able to tell her story, we were able to share her story with the world, and we were able to move the conversation forward and push through legislation. So Sabah is the real hero, and women like Sabah who speak up and speak out in the most difficult of circumstances in the parts of the world that we live in, they are the real heroes.
Interesting, because Sharmeen, I've described you many times as one of the boldest filmmakers I know and a force to be reckoned with. So that applies to you, of course. You talked earlier about in telling Sabah's story, you were also telling stories of men who champion women. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I've always believed that it's important to highlight the men who champion women, because in many cases, they champion women knowing that there will be repercussions, and yet they do. So amplifying their voices, enabling others to learn about their stories is so important. So when you watch the film, you have the father and the uncle on one side, but look at all of these other people, the doctors, the lawyers, the police officer, all of these men who went on to help Sabah. So we can't paint everyone with the black and white brush. There's so many shades of gray in the middle. We need to look at these stories of all of these men and hope that when young men, especially when we do facilitated dialogue in Pakistan in screenings, look at these men and say, these are the kind of men we want to emulate. These are the kind of men we want to be. We took the police officer to a number of our film screenings, and he always gets a standing ovation. My first reaction when I met him was, oh my God, like, are you serious? Like, when he started talking, I was completely blown away. I was not expecting this at all. The hospital that she was in, I mean, the doctors from the top down, every single male doctor over there was so riled up that this had happened to her. It was almost like they wanted to go out and fight for her. And these are small towns, and these are not places that you would expect this. And from everything, from the fact that a rescue 112, which is like the 911 call of that area, like the rescue services were there, they rescued her, the doctor saved her, the lawyer was there. I mean, these are incredible things to be happening. So the system does work when it wants to work. And that's also something that we should take away from films like this.
And so how is Sabah today, or where is she today?
Sabah has 2 children now, a son and a daughter, and she's doing well. Her husband and her are doing well, and she's investing in educating her children. As she says at the end of the film, she really hopes that her daughter will grow up to be someone who is able to freely choose her life. And I think that Sabah will enable her daughter to do so.
I thought one of the really moving moments and telling moments in the film was when she says, I forgive them because everybody told me to forgive them, but I really haven't forgiven them, from her heart. And that was, incredible. I wanted to also talk to you about, so in addition to documentary filmmaking, you've been doing a lot of other stuff. You've been doing art shows. You have worked on this, the archive project, Citizens Archive. Tell us a little bit about those as well.
In 2007, I began to look at our history in Pakistan and see that what do we have that we can pass on to future generations? Have we preserved our oral narrative? archive? Have we preserved our photographs, our own newspapers? And I realized there is no central repository for that in the country. And so I set up an organization called the Citizens Archive of Pakistan. And its aim was to gather as many oral histories, photographs, newspapers. And we recently, in July, opened the doors to our first digital interactive immersive museum on the grounds of Minar-e-Pakistan in Lahore. It's an incredible museum. So if anybody goes to Pakistan, you must visit the National History Museum. And it's based on the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's archives. We've collected over 3,000 oral histories of people from the first generations and the second generation of Pakistan. We've collected over 100,000 images, digitized entire collections, and now from one museum, our plan is to open all of these other museums, and we're linking up with museums in India, with the Partition Museum, and trying to do cross-border events. And the whole idea is to engage the next generation, to reflect on where we've come from. I also have a project that's particularly dear to my heart. I've built Pakistan's first mobile cinema, and we're taking films into communities, into towns, into small villages, into places where children and women and men have rarely access to any form of cinema. And so we're taking social justice films as well as fiction films, and really it's an incredible sight. If you go onto our website, you'll see this large mobile cinema pulls up in these remote areas. We set up as sunset, and hundreds of people gather and watch this content and this facilitated dialogue. And we've traveled to over 200 locations in the country so far, so that's something I'm particularly excited about. Wonderful. And my next film, which is out on October 2nd on HBO, is a film shot here in America for the last 2.5 years. It's a film produced by LeBron James. We're looking at the NCAA, college sports in America, and the exploitation of players.
And some of you probably know that we have We Are films out in the lobby that we're presenting in partnership with NIFTY tonight, the National Film Festival of Talented Youth, which takes place also at the end of October. So we're showcasing 5 of Sharmeen's We Are films. So Sharmeen, how did the partnership with the Crisp Milk come about to make those films?
So the 5 virtual reality films, really, I encourage as many of you to go and see them because they're a visual treat. So we have a film in a dance school in Lahore, a film in a music academy in Jamshoro, a film in Thar, in the desert with a man who's bringing water, a film about a hospital in Karachi, and a film about women in the anti-terrorism squad, these incredible women in Nowshera. You see them in bomb disposal squads, rappelling down from buildings, really shattering stereotypes. And each film is just visually gorgeous. What we wanted to do is, I often get asked, what's it like to be in Pakistan? And so I decided to bring Pakistan to people. And you put on this headset and you're right there in the center of things. So because we're such a beautifully diverse country, I wanted to show not only the music and the dance, but also show the hospitals and show the desert and show as much of the scenery as possible by focusing on 5 different heroes in the country who are doing incredible work. So it's called Look But With Love. If you don't get an opportunity to watch it tonight, I think it's also this weekend.
Right, from September 28th through October 1st, they'll be at the Sweet South Asian Film Festival. But yeah, I hope you get a chance to check them out tonight too.
And they're 4 minutes long, so it won't take you much time. I encourage people because it really does. People are like virtual reality, but when you put it on and you're in that world, you'll thank me.
I totally agree because I went through that when I watched them first. Are you going to continue working in VR?
I'm experimenting some more. I'm always interested in experimenting with form. So right now, I don't know if any of you are aware, but I've created Pakistan's first animated feature film, which came out a few years ago. It's a trilogy. The last of it is out this year. We're also working on an animated short right now, which will be releasing here in the United States next year. And so we're working on a lot with form to tell stories, whether it's animation or virtual reality or film. And the idea is to bring as many stories as possible from different parts of the world, you know, and bring really champions from different parts of the world to a global audience.
So I have one more question, and then we'll open it up for the audience to ask questions. I know your new project, you've done a series of film that's educating women on their rights. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. About a year ago, I was having a discussion with a number of women from different economic kind of stratas in Pakistan about women's rights. And I just realized that women have absolutely no idea about the rights that are enshrined to them in the Constitution. Some women don't even know how to go and file a police report. So we decided to, in partnership with the Women Action Forum in Karachi, we came up with 13 topics educating women about their rights, from how to file a police report, what to expect on your marriage certificate, how to file for a divorce, how to inherit property, what happens if you're raped, what to do in cases of sexual harassment, what to do you know, when you find yourself, when an incident happens in your home, how to tackle, what organizations to go, what kind of shelters there are. And the first of it was, the first of the 13 episodes was released last week. The second one gets released this week. So every week for the next couple of months. And these how-to kind of short films are getting dubbed in all of the regional languages and getting distributed free across the country.
Great. Wow. So I, of course, have a million questions to ask, and I can keep going, but we're going to open it up to the audience. And there should be some mics. Oh, if you can come up to the mics, there are 2 mics on each side, and ask your question.
But unfortunately, I didn't know all these things about. So first of all, thank you. Second, my important question, have you ever thought about making a movie about forgotten people?
Which forgotten people?
Okay, so, all right, so there was a war in 1971 war between India and Pakistan. There were more than 300,000 people who had been put in a camps
in Bangladesh.
In Bangladesh, and there was a treaty was signed that these people were taken to Pakistan. But unfortunately, they are still there, and the 2 generations, they died, and they're living like a cockroaches, and the whole world has forgotten them. And it's so sad that they call themselves Pakistani, and they are still living in a camp when Pakistan accepted millions of people from around the world, Afghanistan, all these people migrated from India in 1947, and after the war in 1971, they said, listen, we came here for Pakistan, so we want to go to Pakistan. And they were never, ever allowed to go to Pakistan.
I'm aware of their stories. There's a book that's just come out by a young woman called Anam Zakaria in Pakistan, and she spent a little bit of time with this community of people writing about them.
If you would like to make a movie, I'll fund that movie.
Oh. Okay. Well, I will get in touch. As many of you may know or may not know, my father and my father's family were from East Pakistan. So, you know, I have a strong affection to that part of the world. And I recently did a film in Bangladesh about women peacekeepers. So we will talk.
Thank you.
Hi, Sharmeen. My name is Bharti, and I'm from India. I have one observation and 2 questions. The first one is, oh my God, how productive are you? I mean, I feel like a couch potato, you know? Number 2, do you have any aspirations of becoming the next prime minister, or maybe a couple of years down the line, of Pakistan?
Ask that all the time.
I think you ought to get into politics. I think that is when you're going to make the true difference that you are absolutely capable of. And number 3, you should go to India and make all those films that you're making in Pakistan for all the women out there. I think that is so amazing. Oh my God, I'm getting goose pimples just thinking about that. The kind of
I
work
just made
you're
a film
doing.
in India last year. It's called Ladies First. It's on Netflix. It's about a young girl who was born on the side of the road and became a star. She's became one of the world's #1 archery star. So Ladies First. So if you want to check it out, yeah. Politics. You know, I get asked this question only when I speak in America. And no one ever asks me this in Pakistan. You know, I think that with me personally, I see myself doing as much work as possible to help push the agenda forward in my country. I have 2 small daughters. Politics is a very difficult business in Pakistan. And I use the word business because that's what it is. And I don't see myself getting involved in that, at least now. But I'm not quite 40 yet. So, you know, there's a long way to go. And so, for now, I don't think so. But thank you so much. Also, I am a workaholic, so yeah. And I have the best team in the world that works with me. So I've made quite a few people workaholics. So we do a lot of things all at once.
Hi, I wonder if you can talk about the impact tonight's film has had, first in the neighborhood where it takes place, and secondly, Pakistan overall, and then around the world.
So when A Girl in the River came out, we did over 300 screenings across Pakistan, from universities and colleges to small towns and community centers. And the idea was that each film screening would be part of a facilitated dialogue, because it's very important to show a film but have a dialogue around it, because a lot of people can walk away with very many different takeaways. And some of those discussions and facilitated dialogue that we have was difficult, you know, because one in particular that has been written up in Dawn, the English language newspaper, happened at the University of Peshawar, where you had girls sit on one side and boys sit on one side. And the boys were cheering the father on and the girls were cheering Sabah on. And at the end of that discussion, we didn't realize there was a Dawn journalist in the audience, but at the end of the discussion, there was a facilitated dialogue, and you could tell that the conversation had turned by the time that dialogue ended, and you could tell that there were a number of young men in the audience that were nodding towards the women and saying that we understand where you come from. And so, you know, what we do is not, there's no magic wand, there's not going to be change in the mindsets overnight, but hopefully with each intervention, there will be some minds that will open up and be introduced to competing ideologies. The film had an impact when it came to legislation. It facilitated, acted as a lightning rod and pushed through a stalled legislation in the country, which now makes it virtually impossible to forgive in crimes of honor killing, and mandates a minimum 14 years prison sentence. And I think the most important thing for me with this film is that you had every single newspaper, television, radio host talking about honor killings, even on primetime television. And it's awareness that we want to create. And our work is simply not done just when the film is put on air or when the film, you know, in the months leading up to the film. This film is shown again and again and again. It was recent, you know, we get requests all the time from different organizations, from universities and colleges and schools to show the film. And so it's an ongoing dialogue, because ours is a business of changing minds, and it's a process that's evolving and continuing.
So, I have a question for you. I'm here. Yeah. So, thank you so much for making these wonderful films. And you're very right in saying that, you know, it sort of initiates a dialogue and it adds to an ongoing feminist discourse in Pakistan. In fact, you'll be happy to know that 2 years ago, I teach at the University of Washington in Bottle campus. Now, when we launched our Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies program, we actually showed your film, A Girl in the River.
You.
Yeah. And I've taught your film many times. I've taught Saving Face, and I look forward to teaching other films. What really takes me by surprise is the power and the speed with which you're making films in a country like Pakistan, which, as we all know, where gender rights are seriously, limited. So what does it mean? I'm sure you've been asked this question many times. What does it mean to be a woman filmmaker in Pakistan?
I take being a female filmmaker as my greatest asset, actually. I have always used the fact that women are considered non-threatening in so many ways as something that gives me the ability to ask the questions that men can't, to go to places where men can't, to be in the inner sanctum of places. And in places where women are not allowed, I try and be the honorary man, and it's worked a lot. For all of the setbacks in that country, there are opportunities to carve space for yourself to tell these stories. And over the years, I've found that I've had blowback. I've had difficult conversations with people in the corridors of power, often. But I've never been stopped from doing something. And maybe it's a combination of many things, but I think that, I don't want to jinx myself because I still want to continue to make films there. But I think I've just been lucky. I've come in and out of places, I've done things, and it's not like I haven't made, if you think, with A Girl in the River and Saving Face are not as contentious as some of my earlier work, which involved, working with a number of terrorists and showcasing what they're doing and how they're recruiting, and those were really difficult films to make. So I think you have to be a chameleon. You've got to have friends in the right places. You've got to move in and out. You've got to also, you've got to show commitment. I mean, I'm very clear. I make films to push the agenda forward about different issues. And I try and engage with the people who don't want me to make films and ask them why. And also, it helps being very vocal.
I had a question, Sharmeen. Out of all the films that you've made, is there one that was a real eye-opener, or where you learned something and something unexpected?
Oh, every film is, I say like having a film is like having a baby, because you ingest something for like 9, 10, 12 months, and then you put it out into the world, and you want everyone to love your baby as much as you love it. And that doesn't always happen. For me, with every film I've learned something. For example, with A Girl in the River, the idea was to make a film about a young woman who was going to fight and win this case and go on and create history. Well, that didn't happen. So she created history in a completely different way, but the way we were thinking she was going to create history, she didn't create history. So all our preconceived notions about Sabah fighting and winning and all of those things came crashing down the morning when she told us, oh, I'm going to forgive. And then we had to quickly think about, well, what's this film going to look like? In hindsight, had she won the case, the law would have never changed. We would have never been able to push the envelope forward. That it would have been a hero story, but that's all it would have been. And so, in failure, in our thinking of our failure, we actually achieved something. My hardest film to make to date has been a film I did in Syria and Iraq and Jordan in 2008 called Iraq's Lost Generation, working with children who had been maimed and who had been injured in bomb attacks in Iraq, and following them from Iraq into Jordan and Syria as they were rehabilitated. It's probably, you know, the one that was the hardest to do, and the stories that I'll never forget, and the voices I'll never forget.
Hi. Question over here. I think she's been waiting.
Hi. You know, you talked about how when you showed that movie in Peshawar, and there was a boys' aisle and there was a girls' aisle, and you know, it's expected that the boys would say that. But I find that a lot of you know, just like Saba's mother and sister, right? Women are the ones who are not the allies of this person, right? And so it's actually in the women's aisle that you will see a lot of people who may be silent, but who are actually not supporting Saba. Right? So have you had any facilitated dialogues where just women are there, and when there are two sides of that, like some women are saying, yes, she is wrong, just like her mother was saying, well, you know, she has to honor whatever. Have you had that experience, and how has it been?
You know, I know that there are very many women who hold women back, and I think that that's because that's a product of the system, because the system perpetuates that, because they were held back. But we haven't had, actually, we've had a lot of young women who watch this film and say, of course this was going to happen to her. Didn't she realize that this was going to happen to her? Almost kind of acknowledging the fact that when you cross that kind of unmarked line, that this is going to happen to you. But we haven't had that experience where when a woman's watched the film and said, sorry, can I get some water? That this is going to, that, you know, this is the kind of thing that they think would have happened. So I mean, I think we should try that, by the way. That would be a very interesting experiment to do. I know her mother and sister, sorry, I've just recovered from pneumonia, and it's been bad for 6 weeks. Thank you. When you think you're 20, when you're not. So yeah, I mean, we've had a number of women who kind of acknowledged the fact that Saba should have expected this, but none who've seen the film and said that this should have come to her. It's almost as if quietly acknowledging the fact that this is how the system works.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for raising all these issues and highlighting them. My question is, like somebody mentioned over here, the forgotten people. There's another section of society that seems to have been forgotten, and those are the children born to the inmates, the women inmates in the jails. I haven't seen anything that talks about what is being done for them and what happens to them when they grow up, or how long do they stay in there. So have you considered something on those lines?
I have not, to be honest. As I was telling somebody earlier today, that my inbox in my email is filled every day with at least 5 different stories that people want me to tell. And so my answer to that is that I am hopefully grooming the next generation of filmmakers so that we can cover as many stories as possible. We recently worked with a legal aid organization that is working with children, and we made a film. A couple of times a year we make films for free for different organizations, and we made a film for them. It's called Legal Aid, the organization, and they're working with children. So a part of that small film about their advocacy was about the children, but we have not made a film about them, and maybe at some point we will consider that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Saba. Thanks for making these wonderful films.
You know, my mother's name is also Saba.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I had a question about the naming of the film. The Price of Forgiveness. I was thinking in my mind, why not price of being a woman or being in love?
Well, because at the end of the day, it was the price of forgiveness. You know, the fact that she was made to forgive, the fact that she didn't, even that decision was not hers, it was somebody else's. Forgiveness is such a personal thing if you think about it. If I told you tomorrow to forgive somebody, you wouldn't forgive them just because I'm telling you. It has to come from within. And even that simple act of forgiveness, that was taken away from her, and she was forced to do something. And so to me, it was her entire life was the price of forgiveness, because she did something so magnanimous for other people, not simply because for herself. So that's what our goal was, to focus on the forgiveness aspect. Also because we were campaigning to end the forgiveness law.
I think we have time for one or two more questions.
There's a gentleman there, yes.
Incredible film and powerful in a number of ways that outside of the American culture are foreign to us. I noticed that there's Islamic, that there's tribal, and I'm not sure if I'm speaking the word tribal, but...
It's cultural more than anything else.
Okay. The film and the way that you're trying to show it, I think you said 300 community forums. Mm-hmm. How many women and families have been allowed to see it where it would actually impact them to make the change, to make changes and initiate change?
So most of our screenings are attended by women, and we focus a lot on showing the films in places where women have access to the film. But for me, it's equally important to show the film to men, because it's men who need to understand about what they need to do, and how they can't play this control and power game anymore. And so I show the film to women, but I want to show the men the film much more than I want to show it to the women. Because the women know what their reality is. The men need to know what a woman feels like when she has to go through all of this. So that's one.
Thank you for that balance.
Thank you.
Uzma, you have a...
Yeah, so I had a question with regards to how do you get your films through the censor boards in Pakistan? Your films are very controversial, so what kind of things have you had to deal with?
I just get the Prime Minister to show the film at the Prime Minister's Secretariat and just bypass the censor board. My films get, well, A Girl in the River, once the Prime Minister showed it, nobody could say anything. That's the key.
Okay, I think this will be the last question.
Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation. How do you extricate yourself from the subject? Because your original intent was to push the envelope. So while you want to push the envelope, you don't want to influence the subject. So you're in the position, just like you said, she was about to forgive. How do you counsel? Do you stay quiet?
You cry a lot. Why did you forgive? It's hard. It's very hard. But you have to just stand back and let it unfold.
So you let it flow?
Yeah, you have to. You have to just stand back and let it, I mean, I remember the morning she told us that she was going to forgive. I think my wonderful co-producer, Haya, I thought she was going to break down and start crying, because she was like, I cannot believe, like, how, why? And you know, but we all got together, left the house, went into the car, sat in it for about 15, 20 minutes, cursed the system, and came back out, because that's all we could do. You know, I mean, the thing is that it's very, very difficult. But if we were to influence the course of the film, then it wouldn't be real documentary filmmaking. So what we do, and all filmmakers do that, is talk in detail to the subjects about why they're going to do what they're going to do. And we did that with Sabah as well. So in the interview, she says, you know, there was pressure, and I wanted, and you know, I haven't forgiven them in my heart. And so those are the questions that you ask the subject, so that you understand where the subject is coming from. Because everyone rationalizes decisions in some way or the other in their mind. And so that's the only thing that we can do.
One small factual clarification in the movie, and I couldn't wrap my mind around it. The father said that I've never seen Kesser before, but the girl said that they were engaged for 4 years.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
So the father traveled a lot. So he was a salesman, and he would go for long periods of time, and he wouldn't be there. And so there was an understanding. The family had come and bought a proposal, and there was an understanding that she was going to be given to him after a number of years. But the family reneged on that. So she says for that time when her hand was given that she was engaged to him, but it wasn't a formal engagement per se. It's like, we will give you our daughter in a number of years kind of thing, the way it's usually done. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much, Sharmeen, for
Thank
being
you.
here.